Hey everybody, it's Chris with Life 180 and welcome to this video series I'm going to be doing on Doug Andrews' book, The Laser Fund. Now, I've done some videos on this. I've had some positive feedback, some negative feedback. Ultimately, I was just taking a trip. I started reading the PDF version of this book, The Laser Fund, and honestly, in going through it, there's a lot of really good stuff in there. There's some stuff that honestly is totally just half-truths. Here's what I can say. If I didn't know what I know today based on my experience in the industry, going through, talking to actuaries, talking to people that have actually created these products, learning the fact that insurance companies created these products to shift away the risk from the insurance company to the insured, and that's really what's going on here. If I didn't know what I know, I would read this book and I'd be like, holy crap, this is amazing. I'm all in on this strategy. And in fact, that's what I did when I first heard the principles of Index Universal Life in 2009 when I joined the industry. But the problem is, as I learned, as I grew, as I developed and evolved and met people and talked to executives at insurance companies and understood what was going on, then I realized, what's what as far as all this stuff goes. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do this video series. Now, I don't know how many videos that this series is going to be, how long it's going to take. I'm going to try to keep each video between 10 and 15 minutes, and I'm going to try to go through section by section. No promises I'm going to be successful in time frames of everything. I have a tendency to ramble sometimes when I think something's important. But what I will say is I'm going to try to go through section by section. I have not read the entire book. I'm going to let you know that right out of the onset with this. This is going to be a learn as you go kind of situation. As I take notes and I'm reading it and I'm going through the margins, I'm going to go through the book right now and I'm just going to go through and read it and make comments on what I see and where I make notes. I'm making notes with a digital pen saying where what is what and kind of just to kind of stoke my memory about different concepts and things to talk about in relation to what he's writing about. So that's that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go here. I'm going to put myself up there. You can see the Laser Fund, and let's get into this. So I'm going to go down through this. You can see bestsellers Misfortune, Misfortune 101. Those two books, by the way, led to a lot of lawsuits for them. I don't know, Last Chance Millionaire, I think he wrote with his kids. It is what it is. But there's all this going on. So they give express their gratitudes. They break down the sections. The design of the book is nice. I got to give them credit for that. Table of contents, going through all this stuff. And let's see what we do. Introduction. Okay, so let's start by asking, are you sure you want to read this book? We know most authors would never want to dissuade you from reading, but they want to give you caution. So they're doing this because this isn't your average book. It's going to challenge everything you think to be true, and so it's going to flip it on your head. And what they're basically talking about here is the laser fund principles we will discuss in this book are very real. They provide tax-free liquidity and access to cash for everything from business capital to children's educations to charitable giving and emergency funds. Okay, that's true. What I want to say to that, though, is that tax-free liquidity is only half true because, yes, the money is liquid, but the one thing you need to know in Index Universal Life policies is the surrender charges are so high that the early liquidity in policies is typically very small compared to what you can actually design in a whole life policy. And so that's something to take into consideration. They provided safety from the market volatility when using this financial vehicle. So that's the idea of saying upside protection or upside potential, downside protection. That's the safety from market volatility, is saying that there's a 0% floor. But the reality is, while that may be true, there are charges and fees and insurance costs and stuff like that. So depending on how you design the policy, if you do an option B, increasing death benefit, and the policy doesn't perform properly and you are older, the insurance costs can actually get way bigger. And illustrations don't typically perform the way that they say they're going to. They provided rates of return that can consistently outperform other traditional vehicles. Now that is just not true. I mean, when you look at the math of how Index Universal Life works. And I'm going to go through this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this in this section because I'm sure we're going to get deep into this throughout the book. But what I will say is that Index Universal Life policies in general, you're talking about when you're talking about having a cap rate, a 0% floor, let's call it 11% cap rate. What happens is during that cap, when insurance companies, as time goes on, they reduce those cap rates, and it looks good, and they will consistently outperform or be a safer way to go about outperforming the market at the very beginning of the policy while the surrender period is high, i.e. when you're not able to tap into the benefits and the production of the policy because the surrender charges are so high. But later in the policy, they're going to reduce your cap rates, and guess what? So it won't perform as well over a long term as it shows on the illustration. As you become more liquid, cap rates go down, and it is what it is. It's all a marketing game, and so that's that. And so I'm going to try to focus on just the areas that I've made comments, and go from there. Hopefully everybody can hear my kids in the background because it's super loud, so I apologize for that if that's the case. But here we go. So 8 mindsets from scarcity to abundance. I'm not gonna get into all this. I will say that a lot of this is really good. I like the mindset shifts. I like I do agree with everything he's saying, principally speaking, about why people need to get access to capital, why they need a vehicle that's going to be liquid, accessible, why the tax conversation is so important. And, all these things are very important. I think it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, and IULs are just not the vehicle that they say they are. It's not going to do everything that they say they are. So this is, so let's get in section 1, chapter 1, I suppose, now that we went through the intro. All right, so chapter 1 is pursuing more. So this is the thing I like, honestly, I like a lot of the stories that he talks about in here. He talks about the status quo, pioneers in life, people are disrupting ways of thinking. And I do like the idea of disrupting, and he talks about Alexander Fleming and his discovery of bacteriology, Steve Jobs, Netflix, Amazon, Hulu dominating. We talked about Lyft and VRBO and Airbnb and Uber and Lyft and all these things. And like all those things are great. And the hard part that I disagree with is where he gets into this creative destruction component. Now, creative destruction, the idea here is this guy, Schumpeter, whatever, I don't know, in his book, Capitalism, Socialism, and Democracy, he basically was pointing out that the idea here that creative destruction was a process of industrial mutation that incessantly revolutionizes the economic structure from within, incessantly destroying the old one, incessantly creating a new one. So the idea of creative destruction is saying when you come out with something new, it's a cycle of something newer and better coming out, naturally destroying the old, inferior, insufficient vehicle, right? That's the concept behind it all. And so what he's trying to do here is position Index Universal Life as this newer, creative destruction product that's going to destroy old stuff. And so actually, let me get into this and then I'll go where I was going to go. So he's talking about how Index Universal Life, and I mean, he's straight up, because he hasn't told you, this is where it's like, he hasn't told you, if you're reading this book and you haven't gotten to this point yet and you're not familiar with Index Universal Life, he hasn't told you what's what. Like he hasn't told you that this is about Index Universal Life yet, right? So if you're not aware, obviously if you're an agent or something, you know what's going on. But if you're a consumer, you're reading this, you're trying to figure out what's what, you're buying into the concepts and the philosophies, they sound fantastic. You're eager to learn about what could be the new cool thing that's gonna be creatively destroying the financial system that's obviously not working for everybody. To that, he and I agree. And he talks about in 1980, E.F. Hutton caused another wave of destruction when the stock brokerage firm introduced a special kind of insurance policy that offered benefits of cash accumulation, liquidity, safety, predictable rates of returns, and tax advantages. Despite its existence for more than 3 decades, this revolutionary policy is something relatively few experts know about. So what is that? That product, this revolutionary product, is just Universal Life. Universal Life, I will tell you, is nothing revolutionary at this point in time. In fact, more Universal Life policies have lapsed, imploded, and ate themselves alive because of lack of performance and increasing fees. There's been more lawsuits. And for him to talk about that, Index Universal Life, a lot of people think that IULs, I wrote notes here, IULs have not been around since 1980. IULs were actually created in the late 1990s, around 1997, because of the fact that Universal Lives created in 1980 failed horribly. So all they did was basically put lipstick on the pig, so to speak, and they created Index Universal Lives. So it's still the same chassis, but and with a Universal Life, and the insurance component works very similarly to a Universal Life policy, but they tap it into an index, and I'm not going to get into how that works. I have a ton of other videos that talk about how the indexing works inside of a policy, and I'm sure I'm going to get into that in this video, so make sure you subscribe. That way you are notified when I get into those videos. But nothing could be further from the truth in this scenario. He talks about helping... So he talks about how the fact that he used this, helping Live Abundance clients get through the Great Recession without losing principal due to market volatility. He was involved in a class action lawsuit. I talked about that already. Doug and his kids, like his son, I think Andrew, I don't remember which one of his sons, but lost their equities license because of the fact that they were involved in selling a Ponzi scheme. They were involved in class action lawsuits, and yet they're sitting here preaching about the fact that they protected their clients in the Great Recession. And I know there were over 60,000 people involved in this class action lawsuit. So I don't know about you, but for any firm dealing with 60,000 cases, that's a lot of people. So that has to be a high percentage of the people that they were working with. Like I said, I don't know their numbers. I don't know their books. I don't know their business on that level. But when I see a class action lawsuit and he is the sole person named in the class action lawsuit, as far as a company, Live Abundant is the sole company as far as an advisory firm named. There was an insurance company named with it. And I did another video on that, on the Doug Andrew Exposed video. It's kind of crazy. So I'm going to try to make this quick because I'm coming up on my time right now. But this thing here, take ownership of your future. I like this stuff. He talks about these different things. Take ownership of your future. The same hold true for financial planning. There are many principles that people adhere to, even though in actuality they're just myths. Okay, so he's basically saying there's a lot of common myths that people believe. To choose only tax-deferred financial vehicles because you'll be in a lower tax bracket when you retire. So true. The reality is a lot of people are told and coached by their financial advisors that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire. I'm going to sit here and tell you that in the tax world that we live in right now, with our debt at almost 30 trillion, unfunded liabilities at over 150 trillion, hopefully with inflation and everything, you're going to be in a higher tax bracket. If you're not in a higher tax bracket, that means you're taking a step back in your standard of living, most likely. And it means that, we're not able to deal with the things in the government. Like, there's no way taxes are not going to go up. We have all these liabilities, all these debts, and the only way to pay for them is by increasing our tax base. And so I think even if you make the same amount of money with the same standard of living, or even a little less, there's a good chances, nobody's got a crystal ball, but there's a good chance that your tax bracket will go up. People are taught to keep all your money in the market. If you're losing significant amounts, just stay there. You'll come out ahead. That's the whole buy and hold strategy. I've done a lot of videos on that. The buy and hold strategy just does not work. I agree with them there. The best way to get out of debt and get ahead is to send extra principal payments to a mortgage company to pay off your mortgage as soon as possible. I agree. You should leverage your mortgage, pay for it as long as I can. If they're going to be willing to give me 3% interest for 30 years, I'm going to take that all day long. Every couple of years, I'm going to keep refinancing it just to keep pushing the payment out as long as the interest rates stay low, because it's basically free money after you take everything into consideration that goes in with a mortgage. You can make your money as long as you're taking the spread that you would be paying that down and you invest it properly or you save it properly. You can't lose and over a long period of time, and you retain control of your money. So that's another thing I agree with him on. And during retirement, the best way to save on taxes is to stretch out your IRA or 401k as long as possible by taking required minimum distributions, RMDs, as required by the IRS when you start at 70 and a half. So, I agree with all this. Like that's a myth. That's incorrect. That's wrong. And so he gets into all this stuff. He talks about it. So let's see here. So he talks about taking people through an 8-step process here. Taking this kind of personal ownership for one's financial path corresponds with Marshall Thurber's principle of dealing above the line. Marshall Thurber, the revolutionary attorney, businessman, author, and educator, and personal friend of Doug's, explains that we must avoid living below the line, dwelling in blame, shame, and justification. I don't know if that's why he doesn't want to take accountability for his role in the class action lawsuits. He doesn't want to live below the line or whatever. If he feels like he's doing the right thing, my only hope is this guy feels like he's doing the right thing and coaching people to the right thing. But anybody who's doing this with Index Universal Lives, with these assumptions that are in place with these policies that I've seen, there's no way you can actually think long term that these are going to work. Every bit of evidence we have about Index Universal Life over the history shows that cap rates go down, performance never hits what it's going to be. It's a lipstick on the pig of Universal Life, which was a horrible failure when people tried to sell it in the 80s, the same way that people are trying to sell Index Universal Lives now. People were doing that with Universal Life back then, and this is just going to be a repeat of the cycle. This is an experiment, people. They try to sell Index Universal Life and all the benefits of it, and they try to say insurance companies have been doing this for 30 or 40 years, or even some people I've seen, not Doug, to his defense, but some people talk about the fact that they've been doing this for 150 years. Well, insurance companies that have been around 150 years, and were in the whole life industry, have been doing Index Universal Life. Like Nationwide, for instance, has been doing whole life forever. They just switched to do IUL. Why? Because they're looking to shift the responsibility and the guarantees from the insured and the risk from the insured, or from the insurance company. They're trying to shift the risk from the insurance company and put it on the insured. And that's why they're trying to sell more Index Universal Life at this point in time. And that's pretty simple to understand. So he's talking about trailblazing a path. He's been a trailblazer, and he's talking about all this stuff. And I said, this is a relatively new path and already proven to be unpredictable, because ever since these were created in 1997, 98, it's been nothing but downhill, like I just said. So I got a little ahead of myself there. What does he say here? It's not $36,000 inside 401k. You'll need to withdraw. Oh yeah, so he's talking about taxes in a 401k. So it says, except where noted throughout this book, we'll be using 27% as an average tax bracket, which is comprised of 22 to 24% federal tax bracket for incomes $75,000 and 3 to 5% state tax bracket. So that's a fair assumption. I think that's good. In this book, we'll show how it's possible to enjoy 7% per year payout. So if you're familiar with the 4% rule, according to Monte Carlo simulations, it's basically saying 4% is a safe amount that you can withdraw once you retire to make sure that your money will last in your portfolio until the day you die on pretty predictable basis. That means if you have $1 million, you got to work hard, save up $1 million, and you'll be able to live on $40,000, which is 4% of that $1 million. He's saying that he could turn it into $7,000. That is absolutely insane. There is no way that they can do it. So think about it this way. If that were possible, and let's just use logic, and I'm going to end this video with this, and then next video I'll get into the next section. But let's think about it this way. If that were possible, logically speaking, every Index Universal Life company that sells, and every company that sells Index Universal Life also sells an indexed annuity. The indexed annuities use indexing in the same strategies, the same way. So how is it that an annuity with no insurance charges and no extra fees or admin costs, the same way that an IUL policy would have, how is it that an Index Universal Life policy can get you 7% income in retirement, But that same indexing strategy with the same company doing an indexed annuity, all things equal, with less charges because no insurance costs and no insurance liability, because remember, every company that does life insurance and annuities, the risk to the insurance company is, with life insurance, you die too soon. With an annuity, you live too long. That's the risk, right? And so when you do that, you're talking about with the annuity, right now, instead of 7%, you're probably going to be guaranteed between 3.5% and 5% at the very best, depending on the design of the annuity. And so look at that. So it just makes no sense. That's why I always tell people, run illustrations for Index Universal Life at 4%. If you're comfortable with the risk at that, still not guaranteed, but I would say that it's a risk that you can get away with, or that you could be comfortable with, and it would have potential upside from that. But that's kind of what you have to be prepared for in a worst case scenario. So, all right, I lied. I'm going to finish this right here because I actually want to get through this section. So, talks about section 2 of the book. On the flip side, we'll explore numerous ways the laser fund can be utilized to empower you, your family, and your business to thrive. It's going to give you a death benefit. That's great. Retirement planning is not as good as they say. In fact, if you get an illustration, I'll tell you that your income from your tax-free income that you will get from an IUL will probably actually only be 30 to 40% of what they illustrate for you if they're running with the current AG48 assumptions, which is typically in the 6% range. Your income will be 30 to 40% of the actual, so like a 60% reduction of income ultimately. It's going to give you working capital. IULs will have worse working capital in the first 10 years because the surrender charges are so high in IULs. School family life, sure. You can put lump sums into it. Okay, you can do that in any permanent life insurance policy. Business planning, sure, it can be good. I will say that is where Index Universal Life policies are really good. If you're a high net worth person and you have a lot of money to put into a policy and you're going to sell a business 5 years from now, you can get a policy now. You can build up a reserve of money that you're able to dump into it. And then when you sell your business 5 years from now, you can just dump a huge lump sum of money in. You cannot do that with a whole life policy. That is where business planning can be good from that perspective. Life emergencies, okay, you have access to capital. Once again, that goes back up to here. Not as much capital. Estate planning, I do believe life insurance is the best way to make sure that you pass your estate as tax efficient as possible to the next generation. Real estate, you can leverage policy loans to get real estate. Once again, whole life is a better option for that. And I could get into why, especially when you do cash value lines of credit for real estate, where you can get lower interest rates with a whole life policy than you can actually even get in an IUL, which is great. Strategic rollouts, I don't even know what he's talking about there yet. Probably tax-free income is my guess. Strategic rollouts, I don't know. And tax reductions. Tax reductions just depends. That's a variable we don't know. It could actually increase your taxes today, but I'm a big believer in agreement with him probably that it doesn't matter about our tax liability today. We're really looking to reduce our lifetime tax liability. If you get a tax deferral today, that's just postponing, kicking the can down the road. If that happens and you get that today, but then it costs you more in taxes later, is that really beneficial? So the tax reduction thing, there are variables that we don't know. You just have to come up with what you're comfortable with and go from there. So the final 5 takeaways, I'm not going to read them all, but I agreed with 4 of them, or 3 of them it looks like. The IULs, talking about creative destruction has led to significant advances in everything from medicine to media to financial services. This is not creative destruction, people. This is just another product. This has been going on and it's been failed. I mean, this is a second generation of a universal life. IULs are second generation of universal life. Universal life failed horribly. This has been just trending downwards over the past 30 years, or since 1997, so 24 years or whatever. And during that period of time, they've gotten worse and worse and worse. More companies have come into the market because they realize, like, in a low interest rate environment where they're having a hard time getting fixed returns in their general account, they need to offset the risk from them to the insured. And so that's why more and more companies are pushing this, and they go from there. As you turn the pages in this book, you will discover financial and abundant living strategies that can be life-changing, not just for you, but for your posterity. So, that's where I will leave it. I don't agree with that last statement, but that is my review of the first, for the introduction and the first chapter of Doug Andrews' Laser Phone book. And if you have any questions, any comments, put them in the section below. If you want to make sure you're notified of every time I launch a new video on this series, I'm going to be doing it on a regular basis over the next couple of weeks because I think it's going to take that long to get through it all. But I think it's going to be really, really powerful, and I hope it adds a lot of value to people who are contemplating and thinking about if this strategy is right or wrong for you. Once again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I want to come out with that first and foremost. I'm saying if it's sold with the wrong expectations, it can be a bad thing. Set yourself for 4 to 4.5% on the assumption for the assumed rate for the illustration. And if you're comfortable with the risk there and the performance there, then it can make sense. But when they're selling it at these high, absurd assumptions and making you buy or getting you to buy into the philosophy based on those unrealistic expectations, it could be dangerous. So anyway, I hope that helps. Go out there, have a blessed, inspirational day. Talk to you on the next video. Take care.